Hey, how's it going, everyone? It's the music reviewer here, and today is episode 12 of my album review podcast series. And today's band is going to be Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever. It's a band from Australia. We're reviewing their latest album, Sideways to New Italy, and thank you for joining me once again. Uh, Last episode, I covered the latest Heinz album, the all-female rock band from Spain. If you're interested in that one, go and check that one out. That was a pretty decent album. I liked it a bit. And also, I've been doing a new series called Best and Worst Track of the Week. If you want to check that out, that one's available as well for last week, and I'll be doing it again this week as well. So yeah, let's get started on this review. The album is titled Sideways to Italy, band being Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever, five-piece Australian indie rock band comprised of practically like three guitarists that are also the vocalists in the band that take turns being like the primary singer, a bassist, and a drummer, and they're all really great musicians. These are one of these bands that um, perhaps their biggest strength and their biggest weakness could be their skill or just their talent in general. There's probably um, a lot of negotiating, and I assume probably collaboration with a band like this, where I assume most of the members in the band are capable songwriters that can probably write an entire song themselves if they wanted to. A little background on this band. They released an EP in 2016, which I guess got them traction in Australia, but the year after they actually released another EP on Sub Pop in 2017. Sub Pop being a huge indie rock label in the United States, which 2018 that followed their debut album, and I have not really been much of a listener of Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever, really due to the fact is just I haven't really been exposed to much of their music, or I neglected to explore their music. And not that anytime I listened to it, it turned me off. I didn't like it. I just say that their sound is pretty typical of what you'd expect a indie rock band to sound from the 2010s. And when I mean the 2010s, I mean probably something more of like the early 2010s or late 2000s. They take a lot of influence from post-punk as well, but they have similarities with bands like Real Estate, Dive, Kings of Leon, War on Drugs. Maybe not so much on Kings of Leon, but the maybe like these indie rock juggernauts such as War on Drugs or Real Estate. And what I mean by this is that they rely heavily on their guitars, and when you rely heavily on guitars, well, you're gonna have a lot of things that sound similar. And they fall into these patterns where I see a lot of similarity to the jingly guitars of like Dive or Real Estate, and then also the songwriting uh, patterns that the War on Drugs uses with a lot of instrumental interludes that build up, and it turns into like this kind of jammy piece, and that really does work for a lot of bands. Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever, that's definitely their sound. I just think maybe they don't do it the best, which there's nothing wrong with that. They have developed a sound, a fan base, and they're already releasing their second album. I just had to do some research and homework on what this band is all about. And another highlight I'd point out would be they're from Australia, and Australia actually has lately probably been kicking the U.S.'s ass in terms of rock music. You have Tame Impala, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I'm probably missing so many others. The Bests are another nice little indie rock band that's been up and coming. And I'd say that a cool thing about Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever is that they have their own little niche within Australian rock that is made it over to the US, and is kind of uh, they're kind of finding their own path in that sense as well. Now I'd say in terms of the debut album over to the second album, um, the albums sound quite similar. I'd say maybe they lose a little bit of their post punk edge in this new album here. Um, but the grooves, the chord progressions, they're being used very similarly. Very jammy albums, both of them are. So how does Sideways to New Italy, their sophomore album, stack up to Hope Downs, which was their debut album and critically acclaimed, I believe, as well? Um, how does this album compare to that one? Well, in general, I think Hope Downs was maybe more of a consistent album, but Sideways to New Italy maybe had some more highlights or just things that I thought I liked that the band went with. However, Sideways to New Italy does have its lulls and it does contribute to the overall enjoyment of the album not being as positive as I would have liked it. Now, I will add that this album was produced by Burke Reed, who's an accomplished Australian producer, which I'm looking through his, I guess, work or what he's worked on. Um, the main or the highlights that I'm seeing here probably sports team and Courtney Barnett, which Courtney Barnett has been well received. I'm not sure how the work translates to this album. I don't think it really sounded. This album has sounded like a Courtney Barnett album. Maybe he was more of an engineer um, on this album, but I just thought I'd note that as well. That this was not maybe like a self-produced album. Now we'll start off with how this album went by the highlights on the tracks. So there's really nothing to the opening track other than this is the track that sets the tone for the rest of the album. It has a lot of the same patterns that are overly used on this album. There's a bright acoustic guitar here that really shines through. There's punchy bass lines, melodic guitars. I'll just note that a lot of these songs sound a lot like the second or the first, which is the opening track. But the main highlight I'd like to start off with here is the second track, Falling Thunder. Um, it starts off sounding awfully similar to like a dive track in the intro, with some splashes of real estate, with like reverby guitars, just sparkly like jangly guitar work. And there's a hooky chorus I like on this track. With the lyrics, "Is it any wonder?" and it's just used a lot. I like it. I like it a lot. This was a nice track. Also, this track utilizes a second lead vocalist, so you definitely see the versatility of the band, how they're able to switch back and forth between vocalists and keep some consistency. They're all pretty decent singers. Um, this track also has a really nice groovy bass line that's steady, a nice bridge idea that builds up a little bit more into like an instrumental outro. And then the album just continues to hold the consistency there. She's There, the next track, has a nice little hooky guitar intro. There's probably the most exciting track on the album thus far. Has a nice imagery with time as a river, being in the lyrics there. Has a nice little vocal performance. There's attitude in it. It's a convincing performance. There's some nice melodic ideas that play back and forth between the guitars and vocals, which happens quite a bit in this album. So they do like to play around with this sort of, I guess, composition technique where a melody will be in the vocals and then later a counter melody or a very similar melody will be in the guitars right after. It has like these dueling guitar parts there as well. And right here, I'd say on the third track, She's There, it's pretty obvious that the band's starting to follow sort of pattern with a lot of their tracks. It's like, it starts off with an intro with melodic guitar, verse with like a very, I guess, practical rhythm guitars, and then once the vocals cut out, back to melodic guitar part. Then we get a nice big chorus, back to the same thing for the second verse, and then there's like some instrumental build up, which that works. It certainly does shine on moments, but it kind of will grow stale as you listen to this album more and more. That's the only thing I'd say about that. Beautiful Steven is another Um, Another highlight I like to point out. It's probably my least favorite track on here, or one of them. Um, there's bright guitars in it that are a little tad piercing. So like, yeah, those guitars. I don't know if it's like a mixing flaw or something, but sometimes they're just a little too high, or they're just very in your face. It has some delay in there. It kind of still goes back to like the dive in real estate kind of thing. Reverby guitars, an uninteresting vocal performance, unfortunately. Guitar being played at the beginning of each measure and held out for 4 beats is constant until the end of the track, so slightly, I guess, unoriginal guitar playing. I feel like this could have been left out. The album really didn't need it. Um, Now, the only one, this is a mid tempo track, has some nice bright melodies and guitar, some enchanting vocal moments. There's more attitude, so the vocals do pick up. Lots of syncopation in the bass. Uh, and yeah, I point out this track because it has like a new wave vibe to it. It kind of reminds me of that one track, Ran So Far Away, from that one band from the 80s. Like I ran, that song. Hooky guitar intro. It has like this whaley harmonica thing happening too. Not a bad track. Cars in Space is probably like the next track after that. It's probably their most jammy song on here. It is a highlight though. I do like it. The song develops quite well. Like the main melody, I like the main melody and the vocals. There's an excellent drum performance on here. You can really hear that nice technical hi hat work. The bridge is nice and textured as well. There's some spots where the guitars play melodic ideas, like most of these songs, where that's literally all that's happening in a certain section of the song. It's just there. Sometimes it doesn't develop. Sometimes the song does, I guess, benefit from it. But yeah, Cars in Space, upbeat tempo, bouncy bass line, slightly more energetic. Not a bad track. I liked it. Um, Let's see, we do go 2 songs later and not tonight. What I'd say here is this song has a little bit of an Americana flair to it. There's like a slide guitar part, which shows a little bit more versatility in the band. I like that. It'd be nice if they maybe would have played around with that a little bit more. And then I'd say the next low light here is the track after that, Sunglasses at the Wedding. Uh, this is, well, I'd say this isn't really a low light. This is just something I thought was worth mentioning. I think it wasn't too bad. This is probably like the most dramatically different track. It has like a folk aesthetic, tasteful drums accompanying everything. The bass is nice, fat, and warm. It's accompanying as well. It's not bad. It's a bit of a stylistic shift. It has some light textures. But it really doesn't develop into anything. It's never brought up again in the album. It just literally happens in that one song. And then the album ends right after that on probably like the um, the most obvious filler track on this album, called "The Cool Change." It sounds maybe like an ode to like some old Britpop, maybe some Oasis. Nothing much of interest that's happening in this track. It doesn't have much energy, and it's just a little bit of a disappointment, and it just ends like that. The album wasn't too bad up until then, actually. Um, Now, I'm not sure really what I would rate Sideways to New Italy. I'm gonna go ahead and rate Sideways to New Italy a light 6 out of 10. There are some very nice songs on this part. On this album. I'm happy I did give it a listen, but I do expect a little bit more from this band in terms of, picking which songs make an album ultimately, because there are some really nice highlights on here. And overall, I wish the album would have included more of that. Now, yeah, if you haven't listened to this, I'd say give it a shot if you're interested in some, jangly guitar driven indie rock. If you like bands like Real Estate, War on Drugs, they're a little bit similar to those bands. You might really end up liking this, or you might not because of how of their brand, I guess, of this genre. But yeah, thanks for giving this podcast a listen. I'm the music reviewer, and we'll be seeing you soon.